Hi, I'm Vanessa and I love bad Star Trek. I will be the McDonald's cup used as an ashtray that I definitely didn't take a sip from. That is season 1 of Star Trek's Next Generation. Today I will be talking to you about an episode called Symbiosis, an episode that decides to be propaganda for one of the worst mistakes America has ever made. This episode, more than most, is definitely a product of its time. To give some context, we'll have to scooch back a few years. In 1971, President Richard Nixon declared a war on drugs. John Ehrlichman, a Nixon advisor who was later convicted in connection with the Watergate scandal, went on record in 1994 as saying that the war on drugs was never for the benefit of the country at all. John said, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to either be against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, and break up their meetings, vilifying them night after night on the evening news. And by the 1980s, the Reagans were handed the torch to carry on this war, and they were determined to make the problem so much worse. In 1988, when the episode Symbiosis aired, Congress had passed legislation that attached an automatic mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in federal prison for first-time offenders of simple possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine, a drug most associated with the black community. It's also worth mentioning that no other drug was assigned this kind of mandatory minimum for first-time offenders, not even the possession of the white powder form of the drug cocaine, which was associated with the white community. Furthermore, in the late 80s, Nancy Reagan pushed an unnuanced and stupid just say no agenda, particularly to children. There were also tons of anti-drug commercials, tons of celebrity spokespeople that demonize the substances as well as the addicts. Everyone was getting on the just say no train.
I'm talking about kids' futures. Did you know that marijuana can affect a person's physical and sexual growth?
Yes, that's quite accurate. In a laboratory test, female animals treated with the active component in marijuana experienced a 44% death rate among their offspring.
That's right. Say no to crack so you can live.
Look, everybody wants to be cool, but doing it with crack isn't just wrong. It could be dead wrong.
This message, though, was not informative or useful, much like abstinence-only education. Both are completely ineffectual in truly educating anybody or preventing the outcomes they are designed to help people avoid. Kids my age, back in the Stone Age, were constantly fed messages like this through programs like DARE, otherwise known as drug abuse resistance education. Hypothetical scenario we were always shown was that cool kids were just gonna pop out from behind a tree and force feed you drugs, pressuring you to do them to prove how cool you were, and you would bravely gird yourself and just say no like a really cool kid to battle the evil drug pusher person. This story honestly sounds to me like a kid got caught with some pot and their parents were cops, and so they fed them this bullshit story to get them off the hook. And the parents are stupid, so they just believed it. Symbiosis rallies around this ridiculous, reductive attitude towards a complex problem, and the plot is merely a ham-fisted springboard for that message. As the Enterprise is exploring a sun with unusually high levels of electromagnetic activity, a distress call comes from a freighter, ID'd as belonging to the Unarians, who are just some folks with a wrinkle on their nose. Star Trek is littered with people with various levels of button candy or Laffy Taffy just stuck to their face. Anyway, the freighter is in danger of falling out of orbit and onto the planet, but the freighter's captain, named Tijan, is not sure what's going on.
We've lost, I don't know, something. I am no longer able to maintain this orbit, nor am I able to use the main thrusters. So, dead, I guess.
Data finds out that their magnetic coils are misaligned, and the Enterprise says, hey, we can beam over some magnetic coils, but the freighter captain doesn't know how to install it, even though Tijan has been captaining this vessel for 7 years.
What is the matter with these people? How can you be captain of that vessel and not understand its simplest function? And you don't know how to align a control coil.
Never come up.
Can anyone else over there do it?
Hold on, I'll ask.
So we get a very vivid impression that these folks are just not the brightest. With the freighter disintegrating and being pulled down onto the planet, Yar tries to beam over the passengers of the freighter. And at first, all the Onarians beam over is this cargo. And there's a collective what the fuck from the Enterprise crew as to why people who are doomed to die would be so eager to save this cargo. In fact, the transporter lock is so weak because of the electromagnetic activity that they can only beam over 4 out of the 6 crew members on the freighter, leaving 2 people to die a horrible, fiery death. After the 4 folks, who are 2 Breckians and 2 Onarians, oh yeah, the Breckians are just some more people with shit glued to their face, are beamed in, they instantly want to know where the cargo is. Nobody giving any real thought to the people who just died horribly.
If you had come instead of sending your cargo, you all would have made it.
Cargo. Where is it?
You did save it, didn't you?
And suddenly the crew of the Enterprise is caught in the middle of a dispute over the cargo. And the Onarians claim it is theirs because they pay the Breckians for it already. And the Felicium is vital to their survival because it is a treatment for a fatal plague ravaging their planet. And the Breckians claim it is theirs because the supposed payment was burned away with the freighter, and giving away expensive merchandise is bad business. The fight gets so heated that they all rub their feet on the carpet and zap each other with their fingers.
You didn't pay for it. Therefore, it's not yours.
Damn you, sorry.
But yours like, break it up, break it up. One of my favorite lines is Data counting how many doses are in the container, like it's some jelly bean counting contest.
But now with our improved processes, this one barrel contains over 4 billion doses.
I would estimate 4,375,000,000.
Thank you, Mr. Data.
The Onarians are so desperate for this medicine that the Breckians are approached to give any doses in order to, prevent these people from dying. Presumably, Beverly, Dr. Crusher, the chief medical officer, can't nail down what the plague is. They have no contagions, no signs of disease, no matter how many tests she runs. And when they take these doses to relieve their symptoms, Beverly observes what she believes to be our narcotic effect. I also read on Memory Alpha, the sort of Wikipedia page for Star Trek, that the Felicium is actually red lentils, which I happen to have right here, a whole bag. ASMR. That's disgusting. It turns out that the plague was actually cured long ago, and these folks are just hooked on what the Breckians are selling them. The Breckians' economy is entirely centered around making purer and purer forms of Felicium. The Onarians are completely in the dark about being hooked on the drug because remember, they're stupid, meaning they probably don't have the medical knowledge or technology to figure out anything about this plague. In fact, the Onarian leader contacts the Enterprise D directly, begging them once again to please beam down the Felicium right now.
Do you have it?
Yes, it is here, but...
You gotta get it to us. So please. We're dying down here. You don't know. It's worse than it's ever been before.
Which drives Tijan to hold Riker at zap point to demand that the Felicium be beamed down now. And Picard responds by surprisingly having some big dick energy.
I will kill you. No. No, you won't. You're not a killer.
So these folks can't figure out that they're being scammed into being drug addicts, but can somehow maintain a ship for 7 years with no knowledge of how any of it works. All of this leads to 2 things that just made me mad. I was literally shaking my fist at the TV. The first thing was a feature that many late 80s, early 90s shows had, which was this after school special type of conversation centering around Just Say No. And this time it was between Tasha Yar and Wesley.
What I can't understand is why anyone would voluntarily become dependent on a chemical.
On my home planet, there was so much poverty and violence that for some, the only escape is through drugs.
The implication that drugs are merely to anesthetize those who are financially not doing so hot is ridiculous. Successful and famous musicians and actors, for example, there's lots of fatal overdoses. Wesley, being a genius, would certainly understand this concept at some point, especially since he fully got drunk towards the beginning of season 1.
You mean I'm drunk?
Sometimes the Prime Directive appears to be a way for Starfleet to dispense cruelty from some bullshit moral high ground, which leads me to the other thing that pisses me off about this episode, which is that Beverly clashes with Picard because she's a doctor and she sees people in pain and wants to help them. But Picard says, no, we can't interfere, not even to inform them of what the Felicium is doing to their bodies, because it would violate the Prime Directive. But they sure waste no time thumbing their nose at the Breccians for getting the Onarians hooked on this drug.
They used the Felicium to cure themselves, but somehow their ancestors realized that it was a narcotic.
They broke the cycle of addiction and never told the Onarans. They let them continue to believe that without the Felicium, they would die.
The Breccians decide ultimately to donate the drug in lieu of payment, since the Onarians coming off of the drug would also be bad business. And then as they're beaming down to Onaria, Picard decides to rescind his offer of the magnetic coils to repair the other Onarian ship. So now they can no longer make shipments of Felicium at all anymore, repeating the Prime Directive as the reason, since helping people is also technically interfering.
If you withhold those coils, you'll be disrupting the stability of both our planets.
And interfering with a trade agreement that has lasted for generations. What of your Prime Directive?
In this situation, the Prime Directive prohibits me from helping you.
And by that logic, every time they open a channel or talk to an alien, they're breaking the Prime Directive. Eye contact with anyone, seeing them. It's just a stupid slippery slope. It's weird that all of the Onarian ships also have this same exact problem, and the Onarians and the Breccians have no other ships available at all, but whatever. So this basically forces the Onarians to go without Felicium after this last shipment. And the Onarians now think that they're definitely going to die and are completely justifiably freaking out.
Without the freighters, there will be no more shipments of Felicium. We will die.
Beverly confronts Picard and says, hey, why don't we wean them off compassionately, because I'm a doctor and I can definitely help them with withdrawal symptoms. And Picard's like, no, they'll figure it out themselves. If we help them now, what about later? Which is a very typical Reagan-esque thing to say.
When the Felicium runs out, the people of Onara will suffer horrible withdrawal pains.
No doubt that they will pass.
We could have made their burden easier.
Could we have? Perhaps in the short term. To what end?
Picard is conveniently forgetting that he knows that they're drug addicts, but the Onarians do not. And as far as the Onarians know, they're in the throes of dying from a plague. And withdrawal symptoms could actually very well kill them. They have no idea what is happening to them. But Picard seems unambiguously firm in his position that he's doing the right thing, when I think he's doing the deeply fucked up thing, guided by retrograde dumbass notions of the late 20th century. The addicts in this episode are kept in the dark about their plight, portrayed as so stupid they can't even maintain their own ships, treated like petulant children by people like the Breccians and Picard himself, and withdrawing from a lifelong addiction. Cold turkey is supposed to be some kind of lesson that they need to learn, according to Picard. This stupid story dovetails so perfectly into the criminalization of drug addiction and the "this is your brain on drugs" narrative, when addiction is clearly a sickness of both the body and the mind, and should be treated as such. These people needed help. Dr. Crusher is the only voice of reason and is condescendingly talked down to by Picard about what is best for those suffering from this malady, and uses the Prime Directive to mete out what he believes is a just response to a condition the Onarians never asked to suffer from. The only thing that the war on drugs has accomplished is maintain our famously high prison population, keeping private prisons in business. 40,000 people are still incarcerated as of 2020 for marijuana charges, even though many states have either decriminalized or legalized it by now. I am very sad and disappointed that Star Trek used this show as a platform for this racist and classist agenda. As long as this destructive narrative exists, the war will continue. Like, subscribe, do what you want. I'm not your mom. Till next time, I guess.